We're gonna move back into where we left off yesterday as I shift gears to the war in Russia again. Now, I kind of have to put a few things in this order because just chronologically speaking, the invasion of North Africa, the invasion of Sicily, and even up into the invasion of Italy are basically taking place at the same time as what's going on in Russia. Now remember, when Hitler invaded Russia, it's all but the perfect place to launch the Blitzkrieg. Western Russia is this flat, expansive grassland. Send in the Luftwaffe. Then you send in the tanks. Those tanks can run upwards of 30, 40 miles an hour. They have basically no impediments in front of them. They can go so fast through Western Russia that even Hitler himself says, I might need to kind of slow them down. They're going too fast for their supplies to even keep up. When the invasion comes, it's the summer. They push deep into Russia as the Russians simply fall back on an old tactic that they have used over and over and over again by these people who think they'll be the ones to somehow conquer Russia. Those Russians are willing to trade space for time. Almost welcome the enemy in and wait for the secret weapon. What's the secret weapon? The winter. These German troops are pushing into Russia when Hitler says, we're going to succeed. The Blitzkrieg is undefeated. I want my trophy. I want my prize. What's Hitler's prize? What's the trophy? What is? Yes, I know. He wants Stalingrad. He wants to be certain that Stalin is wiped off of the history books. He wants to destroy his namesake as the Nazis are going to split their forces. One Army Group Center is going to move on Moscow. Army Group South is going to divert and they're going to move on Stalingrad, as Stalingrad is going to prove to be the first time that we will see the Blitzkrieg be broken and fail. Stalingrad is going to prove to be where we have, for the first time, the German advance is going to be stopped. But the suffering that's going to take place in Stalingrad is going to be absolutely horrific. Some of the worst suffering of the whole war is going to happen in this one Russian city, and it will prove to be absolutely critical. The fate of the world is in the hands of the people of Stalingrad, as we are going to see that it becomes the turning point on the Eastern fronts. In Stalingrad, things are going to change. Now, I need to kind of explain it as such. Do you remember, what did Stalin do to all of his very capable and bright generals? What did he do? What does he do? He kills them all. He purges them. Any general that showed promise, any general that showed that he was sharp and ambitious, Stalin got nervous and simply had him murdered. Stalin has basically decapitated his own army. There is going to be a handful that are left alive, though. One of them is going to be the general that Stalin puts in charge of defending his city, a man by the name of General Chuikov. Chuikov is not the best and the brightest by any means, but he is tough. He is going to be a very hard individual, and in fact, he's basically friends with Stalin. Stalin tells him that you're the one that's in charge of defending my city. And from the plains of Russia, Chuikov can see very early on, the Russian army cannot compete with the Blitzkrieg. Can't happen. They don't have the supplies. They don't have the know-how. They don't have the technology. Chuikov needs a different way to beat the Blitz. What he starts to think is, I need to neutralize their advantage. The Blitz is great when there's open spaces and room to run. When you can open up those tanks and let them go 30, 40 miles an hour. He needs to take that open space of the Western Plains and tighten it down. Chuikov is going to all but invite the Nazis into the city of Stalingrad and basically challenge them to fight this, what used to be on the open plains. Now we're going to fight in a city. Now we are going to go street by street, building by building, room by room. It becomes this nasty, vicious, urban-style warfare where in some cases it's going to be hand-to-hand combat, fighting on the streets of the city. And as Stalin will instruct Chuikov, not one step backwards. We will defend the city to the last. Stalin will even tell the civilians, the people who live in his city, congratulations, you're now in the army. No one will leave the city, and we will wait for the secret weapon. When winter comes, we now make this very nasty and brutish kind of street fight warfare. When the worst winter in 100 years comes to the Soviet Union, temperatures in Stalingrad plummet to 80 below zero. You think it's cold out today? Drop it 80 degrees. That's what we're going to see in Stalingrad as some of the worst suffering of the entire war is going to take place. But Chuikov is right. The Blitz doesn't work in tight quarters. Now it's just a matter of who can outlast the other one. The Russians are going to start to push back. When winter does come to Stalingrad, we are going to see an opportunity that the Russians have been waiting for. As Stalingrad itself backs up to one of the biggest rivers in all of Russia, the Volga River. Now, this city sits right on the banks of the Volga. In the summer, it's this fairly big, kind of expansive, slow-moving river. It's almost kind of, you have to think of it like the Mississippi, basically. When winter comes and it drops to 80 below, that gigantic, expansive river freezes basically all the way to the bottom. Hundreds of feet of ice. Now it becomes a highway. You can bring trucks, you can bring cars, you can bring missiles, you can even drive tanks on the river. That's how frozen solid it is. This now becomes the highway to bring reinforcements into Stalingrad, basically unlimitedly. The Germans have the opposite problem. The Germans have vastly overextended their supply lines. And the general that's in charge of the Nazis and the Southern Army is General Paulus. We talked about Paulus before as he had that very ominous dream of the ghostly figure approaching him. Do you remember what the ghost told Paulus? You don't have to say it in French. Really remember? Say it again, I'm sorry. Retreat. Retreat. Paulus is going to send word back to Adolf Hitler and tell him, my men are freezing to death. Some of them are still in their summer uniforms. These men are starving as they don't have the supplies to keep fighting. And Adolf Hitler tells Paulus, not one step backwards. And in fact, I'm promoting you. You are going to be promoted to Field Marshal. Now, Adolf Hitler did this probably for a couple reasons. One, in the history of the German army, never had a field marshal ever surrendered. They either succeed or they commit suicide. What Adolf Hitler is doing is basically telling Paulus, now Field Marshal Paulus, you either win at Stalingrad or you know what the fate will be. Paulus will tell Hitler, I don't want to keep fighting. This is a bad idea. I cannot have my men freeze and starve to death. And Hitler just tells him, then you know what to do, Field Marshal. Paulus will say to his men, and I quote, I'll be damned if I'm letting a corporal tell me what to do. Remember, in World War I, Adolf Hitler was a corporal. He was an enlisted man. For the first time, a field marshal is going to surrender and defy the orders of the Fuhrer. Paulus will surrender in February of 1943. It's at this point where we are going to see the Russians start to take the momentum. They start to push back. However, it comes at a massive cost. Just on the Russian side, just the civilians and the soldiers and the people who starved and froze to death at Stalingrad, 1.1 million people will be dead. But this will be where they start to push the Germans back to the west. We are going to see now the Russian army start to move. Remember, we talked before about the metaphor of the Russian army. They are the great steamroller of Europe.